Greetings, everyone, and welcome to my 2018 DVD and Blu-ray collection overview. Okay, so this time around, we're going to check out this shelf here, which has a lot of different versions of sort of classic monsters. So we got a Dracula and vampire section, we got a Frankenstein section, a werewolf section, zombies, and a little bit of foreign horror movies at the end there. So let's check it out. Alrighty, so here we have, well, I guess you could say it starts off as the Dracula section and then gets into vampires and whatnot. Now, just right off the top, before anyone asks, yes, I do have the Universal Monsters Legacy sets. I've got the DVD collection that came out like 15 years ago, and I've got the 4 Blu-ray sets of the Dracula, Frankenstein, Wolfman, and Mummy. We'll get to those when we get to those. They're actually down on another shelf. But I just wanted to mention that right off the bat because we're kind of covering some of the other movies featuring those famous monster characters. So let's start off here. Actually, I'm just going to start off with the top here just to kind of get these out of the way. We have kind of a, well, we've got Green Room, which I'm not really sure how to classify this, to be perfectly honest. You might call it horror, you might call it thriller. I don't know. It's I haven't actually watched it yet either because, as you can see, it's still shrink wrapped. But I've heard it's really good and really suspenseful and stuff. So for now, it's just kind of wandering around the collection a little bit. Here, now I'm putting it in the Screen Factory section. And then we got a little home invasion section. We've got The Strangers, which, speaking of Scream Factory, they actually just put out a collector's edition of this, which I may get. I haven't actually watched this yet, so if I like it, I may upgrade to the collector's edition. Then we have You're Next. This was such a pleasant surprise. I really enjoyed this movie a lot. This is a lot of fun. It was much more of a lot more dark humor in this than I was expecting. It's not your typical home invasion flick, and it takes a lot of fun twists and turns along the way. I definitely recommend it. And not strictly home invasion, but home invasion is part of it. We have Last House on the Left, the wonderfully disturbing film from Wes Craven, one of his earlier works. Just a great, great film. I've not seen the remake of that, but I've seen the original a couple of times. All right, so now let's start off here with we have Nosferatu, which of course I did do a review of. This sadly is not the best Blu-ray edition out there. It's the only one we have in Region A land. There's a couple of Region B locked ones which are actually a better transfer. So just set that aside to kind of loosen things up. And I did a review of the movie this past Halloween. I also reviewed this one, which is the 1979 remake by Werner Herzog. This was really good. I had not seen this before watching it this past Halloween, and I really enjoyed it. I watched both the English and German versions, and did quite an in-depth review of them. Very good stuff. And then here we have Count Dracula, starring Christopher Lee. This is not part of the Hammer series. This is actually a standalone one, directed by Jess Franco. Really good stuff. It claimed at the time to be the most faithful adaptation of Dracula ever done. Well, it starts off that way, and then it kind of goes into its own thing after a while. Still a very entertaining take on it, though. I liked it a lot. And here we have Dan Curtis's Dracula, starring Jack Palance. This one was actually really good, and I really enjoyed it a lot. One of the big notable things about this is kind of where the whole idea of Dracula being a romantic, tragic figure started. Like, this kind of introduced the Dracula, romantic love story angle to the story, whereas prior to that, he was just pure evil. And then here we have the wonderfully seductive Frank Langella in his take on Dracula, also from 1979. And this is great, based on the stage play. Now, interestingly enough, this is not so much a romantic Dracula as a seductive Dracula. I mean, he is still very much pure evil. And then we have Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula, which basically kind of borrows elements from all the previous major versions, as well as putting some of his own unique spins on things. Some of which I like, some of which not so much. I'll do a review of that at some point. And here we have Dario Argento's Dracula 3D with Rutger Hauer as Van Helsing. Lots of fun there. This is also quite a different take on the story. Again, some elements of which I like, some of which I do not. I'm just kind of scratching my head. And then we have The Return of Dracula, which is not a Universal movie, but since Universal seemed loath to do a sequel, and Bela Lugosi wasn't going to be in any of them, there was a lot of other Dracula sequels that came out. Here we have Dracula versus Frankenstein, a famous 1970s low-budget affair, and featuring Lon Chaney Jr., one of Lon Chaney Jr.'s later appearances shortly before he passed away. And then we have Dracula Untold, which was originally supposed to be the start of the Universal Monsters cinematic universe. They eventually changed their mind and decided not to have it part of it. And then we have Count Yorga, Vampire, another popular 70s one. And then, of course, we have the sequel, The Return of Count Yorga. So you got to get both of those. You got one, you got to get the other, right? And then we got Blackula and Scream, Blackula, Scream. Wonderful movies. I had not seen these before until picking up the Blu-ray. I'd, of course, heard of them, but I hadn't seen them. Really good. I mean, considering you'd think they're just kind of straight-up exploitation movies. And yes, they do kind of, poke fun at some of the tropes of, like, blaxploitation movies and horror exploitation movies. But that said, they're also really quality films. These are really enjoyable. I enjoyed both of them a great deal. I'll definitely be watching those again. And here we have The Velvet Vampire, which I first discovered on Laserdisc, and still have that Laserdisc, actually, many moons ago. This is a terrible movie, but it was part of, beginning my love of So Bad They're Good movies, and for that it'll always hold a special place in my heart. And here we've got Night Watch, based on the book, I believe. And then we have Day Watch, which is the sequel to Night Watch. Very good stuff. And here we have 30 Days of Night, Dark Days, which I still have to watch. I've seen the first one a couple times, which I really liked. And I need to reacquire that one, actually. I only have the sequel now. And here we have The Lost Boys, another one I was really late to the party. You'd think I would have seen this back in the 80s when it was kind of significant and hugely popular. But I actually didn't end up seeing it until I had the Laserdisc a few years back. But good fun. I can definitely see why it was so beloved back in my teenage days. And you have Alyssa Milano in the unrated cut of Embrace of the Vampire. This recently got a remake as well, which I do not have. And then we have Interview with the Vampire. I've watched this more times than I can count. I used to have this on Laserdisc. I also have the music score, or had the music score. I don't know if I have it anymore, on CD. And I just loved this movie. I thought it was a fantastic take on the novel. And yes, I have read the original novel. And then we have Queen of the Damned, which I actually have yet to watch. My understanding is it kind of takes elements from the second and third books in the Vampire Chronicles and smushes them together into a far too short movie. But looking forward to checking that out. I hear, actually, speaking of the Vampire Chronicles, there may actually be a long-form TV series adaptation in the works, which I think is honestly the best way to do that saga, just because it's so long and complex. It would give them the opportunity to, take their time with it. Here we have Night of Dark Shadows. I used to have House of Dark Shadows, this is based on the series Dark Shadows. I used to have House of Dark Shadows on VHS many, many moons ago, and I think I had it on DVD for a while. I need to pick up the Blu-ray because I really like basically anything Dark Shadows. And here we have the Tim Burton Johnny Depp one. It's not actually 3D, it just has a cool lenticular cover. I was expecting to hate this from the marketing because it was kind of marketed as a zany comedy. But it's not a zany comedy. It was very badly marketed and I enjoyed this far more than I was expecting to. It was good fun. They have Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter, which is just such cheesy fun. You don't go into a movie like this expecting high art. This does what it says on the tin and is far more entertaining than I was expecting. It was a lot of fun. And now we're into the little Frankenstein section here. We have Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, which is actually a take on it that I really like. I've always really liked this movie, and after reading the book, I like this movie even more because it actually, overall, is quite faithful to the book, and is also one of the few sort of major adaptations in which the monster is permitted to speak, which is pretty good. And here we have another take on Frankenstein with Luke Goss as the monster, Alec Newman as Frankenstein, and William Hurt as his sort of mentor. I actually really like this. This was a miniseries version, and I thought this was quite well done. Very good. Luke Goss plays a very sympathetic version of the creature. And here we have Victor Frankenstein with Daniel Radcliffe and James McAvoy. This is definitely different. It's a different kind of take on it. It focuses much more on Victor rather than on the monster and just sort of his early experiments. Everybody thinks he's crazy. I thought it was fun, honestly. I know some people don't really care for it, but I enjoyed it. And then another one a lot of people didn't care for. We have I, Frankenstein with Aaron Eckhart. The whole time I was watching this, I was thinking, wow, this is very comic booky. Like, this feels like something that I would expect to see in a graphic novel. And then I found out it's actually based on a comic book, so that explains it. Yeah, I actually thought this was a lot of fun. I mean, sort of looking at it as a comic booky kind of story, like kind of thinking of it as, you know, the kind of story you might have seen in Marvel's Monster Frankenstein, like years and years and years ago. Taken in that context, I thought this was a lot of fun, and I actually enjoyed it quite a bit. And we have Young Frankenstein, the 40th anniversary edition. I think this opens up here. Yeah, it opens up and we get some pictures there. Quite nice. Very fun. Rosie and I had a triple bill of Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein, and Son of Frankenstein, and then we watched this. That is the optimal way to do it as far as I'm concerned, because this movie parodies those first three in particular. They really borrow a lot from those three, and it's just a brilliant comedy. And now we have our little werewolf section here. We have an American Werewolf in London. Classic. This scared the shit out of me as a kid. Nowadays I see the sort of dark humor angles of it a lot more. And still, to this day, blown away by Rick Baker's makeup effects in this, especially the transformation sequence. Just amazing. Wolf, which I absolutely love. I hate the Twilighty cover that they did for this, because it's completely inappropriate, but whatever. Marketing, go to hell. I really like this movie a lot. Jack Nicholson, James Spader, Michelle Pfeiffer, gotta love it. It's really good. About a guy who basically sort of takes on wolf-like characteristics that help him in his business dealings and stuff. Because prior to that, he's very meek and mousy and kind of thing, and then the wolf kind of makes him more aggressive and stuff like that. But there's another side to it as well. He also takes on lycanthropic tendencies as well. And speaking of everyone's favorite lycanthrope, we have The Wolfman, the recent remake film, which I recall enjoying. I don't know why this wasn't the start of the cinematic universe, to be perfectly honest. But I don't know, whatever. And then we have our little section of The Mummy. We've got the Mummy Ultimate Collection, which has all the Brendan Fraser Mummy movies, as well as the first Scorpion King. It does not have any of the Scorpion King sequels, because I guess the first one is the most sort of directly related, so that's the only one they did. And then here we have the actual beginning of the cinematic universe, which apparently has now been abandoned. So, yeah, this was supposed to be the start of it right here, The Mummy. And I think the big problem they had, and why this didn't work, was because of Tom Cruise being the primary focus of The Mummy, instead of The Mummy being the primary focus of The Mummy. Yeah, I'm sorry. Like, don't put megastars in your, like, monster movie, because a monster movie should always be entirely focused on the monster. Period. You don't go to a Godzilla movie to see the supporting cast. You go to see Godzilla. You know what I'm saying? So then we have a little Invisible Man section here, which for some reason I decided to start with Hollow Man. So we've got Hollow Man 1 and 2. Nice affordable double bill from Mill Creek. I'm just going to move this over slightly. And then because I got tired of waiting for the Legacy set to come out, I picked up the standalone Blu-ray edition of The Invisible Man. It's the same cover inside. It's just it's a re-release. But on-disc contents are the same as every Blu-ray release that's come out of this. It was just they re-released a bunch of them with these sort of character profile photo covers. Because, you know, whatever. This looks great on Blu-ray, by the way. I was really, really impressed to watch it this past Halloween. And then finally, just kind of wrap up the classic monsters section here, we have Van Helsing, which basically, you know, why wasn't this the start of their cinematic universe? You know, I mean, that's clearly what they were kind of going for there. I mean, this has everybody in it in one big hodgepodge monster mash extravaganza. So, I don't know, man. I don't know. So anyway, there's more stuff that I have featuring a lot of the classic monsters like Dracula, Frankenstein, and whatnot. But we'll get to those when we get to the Legacy collections because they're all kind of in with that. So we'll check that out in a couple of episodes. Next up, we have basically my sort of zombie section here, starting with the granddaddy of them all, the Criterion edition of Night of the Living Dead. Very nice indeed. This also includes, what is it called? Night of Anubis, which is the never before presented work edit of the film. So it's the work print of Night of the Living Dead. Pretty awesome. Definitely looking forward to checking that out. And then we have Day of the Dead. Very nice. And the Dawn of the Dead remake. You may recall I did a rant about this, not including the extras from the DVD edition of the unrated cut. Well, they remedied that with this set, which basically just threw in the DVD edition. So there you go, problem solved. Oh, you want the extras from the DVD? Well, how about we just do a 2-disc set that includes the DVD? So this has all the extras. And I should mention, I don't have the original Dawn of the Dead on Blu-ray because, quite frankly, the Blu-ray editions that we've got here have been kind of lackluster. What I do have, however, is this, the Dawn of the Dead Ultimate Edition DVD set, which has all three of the main cuts of the movie. So it's the theatrical cut, the extended cut, and the Argento cut, as well as an absolute wealth of extras. I have yet to see a Blu-ray edition that is even close to comparable to this in terms of contents. So, yeah, I think there was a version overseas that had a few of the different cuts on it, but I think it's region locked and doesn't have all the extras. But hopefully we'll get the deluxe edition that this deserves on Blu-ray. Honestly, I can't believe it's taken as long as it has, and that we still don't have one. But, you know, we got this to tide us over in the meantime. Okay, so carrying on, we have the Return of the Living Dead. This is just the regular MGM release, which honestly is pretty loaded with extras and is, you know, fairly decent transfer. Shout Factory actually did a special edition of this recently, which I may upgrade to. And then we have the absolutely wonderful Shaun of the Dead. Basically, this is the Canadian Steelbook edition. Very nice. Love this movie. I actually saw this in theaters. This is such a loving parody of and tribute to the entire zombie genre, and in particular, the Romero films. And then we have 28 Days Later. Not strictly zombies, I know, it's the infected, but, you know, where else am I going to put it? I don't have an infected section, so into the zombies it goes, because it's the closest equivalent. And 28 weeks later, of course. Supposedly there was going to be another one. It was going to be like 28 months later, or 28 years later or something, but I don't know what happened with that, if it just got kind of lost in production hell or what. Then we have The Horde, which is, I believe, a Spanish zombie film. This one's really good. I really enjoyed this one a lot. It's a lot of fun. And then we have Danny Trejo in Rise of the And then we have Dead and Buried. All-time cult classic there. And this is a recent acquisition for the collection. We've got the Arrow edition, limited edition steelbook, actually, of Reanimator. This is the original Reanimator. I don't have any of the sequels. Arrow also put out an edition of Bride of Reanimator, which I'm probably going to pick up fairly soon just to go with this one. And apparently, as part of the Vestron video library, they're putting out Beyond Reanimator this July. So I may get that one as well. And then we have my Resident Evil Steelbook collection. I know people are very divided on these movies. I enjoy them. I think they're just good, cheesy fun. I know they kind of don't really follow the games, but I mean, they have a lot of nods to the game and whatnot. And honestly, you can't really do a movie that's just going to be the story of the game. If you just want the story of the game, play the game. You know, bottom line is, you got all the key monsters from the games in here. You got appearances from a lot of the characters. But then fans even complain about that. Say, oh, well, the characters are out of character. It's like, okay, fine, whatever. You can't be pleased ever. I just enjoy these for the good, cheesy sci-fi action horror movies that they are. You know. And it's got Mila Jovovich. I mean, come on. Or Jovovich. I always mispronounce her name. Sorry, Mila, because I know you're totally watching this. There we go. And then the final chapter, which apparently is actually the final chapter. The next one, there is another Resident Evil movie in the works apparently, but it's going to be a total reboot. Just going to move this for a moment here. And then here we have kind of a very tiny little cult section. Cult and Hell section, as I call it. Things to do with hell. So we got Highway to Hell. Here we go. And we have Night of the Seagulls, which is actually part of the Blind Dead section. I should probably move this over to the zombies. In fact, I'm going to do that right now. We're going to put that next to Dead and Buried, I think. There we go. And then we have The Sect. And The Rite. With Anthony Hopkins. And then we have Drag Me to Hell, which I absolutely love. I saw this in theaters. Such a fun movie. Shout Factory recently put out a special edition of this, which I may or may not get. I don't know, because honestly, this is a pretty nice edition. And this has both cuts, just like the Scream Factory one, so I don't know. I'll have to check and see what kind of goodies are on there and see if it's really worth upgrading. I don't like to double dip on everything. And we got Hell and Back. Pretty obviously going to go in the Hell section there. And The Devil's Rejects, which is getting a sequel. I think it's called 3 from Hell. And apparently early word is it's freaking fantastic. So, yeah, I still need to reacquire House of a Thousand Corpses. But, yeah, Devil's Rejects is just a brilliant horror film that is properly horrific. And here we have Hostel and Hostel Part 2. I still have to see the second one. I actually watched the first one a few times. I really liked it. And then we have Mr. Sardonicus and the Brotherhood of Satan. Another double bill from Mill Creek. And I'm not sure why this one is in this section. I don't know. Anyway, we have The Collector. I guess because he puts his victims through hell? Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, and then we have my far too small foreign section. Back when I was just collecting DVD, like before Blu-ray came along, I had way more. And sadly sold the majority of them and don't have that many left. I'll show you a few that I still have left over from DVD land. I still have the 3-disc special edition of Suspiria from back when Anchor Bay was an awesome label. And then I also have the limited edition of Opera. These are both really, still really nice editions, and they also both include the soundtrack, which is pretty cool. But now, all I have remaining, Well, this is actually a pretty cool one that Skinslip recommended to me, and I just picked up the other day. We have the Bloodthirsty Trilogy, which is basically a trilogy of, well, they call it a trilogy, but the 3 films are unconnected. But basically 3 films where Toho, the creators of Godzilla, decided to try their hand at the Hammer horror thing, and they sort of did like Hammer-esque Japanese horror films featuring vampires and stuff. So yeah, I thought Toho does Hammer. Hell yeah, I definitely want to see that. So we're going to be watching those together this weekend. Looking forward to that. And then we have Lucio Fulci's The Beyond. This is the glow-in-the-dark one as well, which you can't really see in the blazing light, but if you look closely, you can see that the glow-in-the-dark paint is on her eyes there and on the logo. So, yeah. Anyway, pretty cool to get this. This is just an insane movie, but great stuff. Classic Fulci. I really got to get the other ones. I think I still have a couple of the others kicking around somewhere. But yeah, I basically decimated most of my collection a while back because I had always intended to get them on Blu-ray, and I just haven't got around to it yet. Now we have an early Arrow Blu-ray. We've got Phenomena, which has since been re-released domestically by, I think it was it Synapse, or I think it was Synapse Films. And they did a really nice Steelbook edition of it. They have Anatomy and Anatomy 2, starring Franca Potente from Run Lola Run. And then you may or may not classify this as horror or dystopian sci-fi. I classify it as horror just because it's so gory and violent. We have the Battle Royale collection. So this includes both movies. A couple different cuts, actually. Yeah, so we've got the director's cut and the theatrical cut of the first one. We've got the second one and a whole bunch of bonus features. It's a great, great movie. I still need to watch the second one. I've heard it's eh. And I think that is it. Yeah, so to recap, vampires, Frankensteins, Wolfmans, Invisible Mans, Van Helsing, zombies, hell, and foreign, and the collector. And there you go. So yeah, I'm sure you'll agree. Quite a mix of adaptations of all those classic monsters and stuff. So pretty cool to see all the different takes on them that have come out over the years. Alrighty, that's it for this one. Next time around, we're going to check out this shelf here, which has quite a variety of stuff. A lot of what I call classy horror movies, so a lot of haunted house and ghost stories and sort of experimental stuff. And then we've also got the found footage section there and some anthology horror. So pretty cool mix of stuff. I hope you'll join me for that. Alrighty, so until then, thanks for watching. Big thanks to my Patreon sponsors. And until next time, sayonara. You can see how awkward this is. Ow. But on the camera it looks fine. Like I'm just kind of poking my head in from the side, so it doesn't really, you know.